Hello, Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on Big Blue View Radio, part of your SB Nation family of podcasts. Please like, share, and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and subscribe wherever you're listening to your podcast across the Big Blue View Radio network. All right, we're getting more and more serious about the 2024 NFL draft, and we've begun to take deep dives into the 2024 quarterback class at Big Blue View. Took a deep dive at look at Bo Nix this week, the quarterback from Oregon, and here on the podcast as well, we'll be talking about as many quarterbacks and other prospects as we can. And today we're going to focus on North Carolina quarterback Drake Maye. And here to help me do that is Akil Guruparan. And I'm hoping I got that right, of
Pretty good.
SB Nation's Tar Heel blog. Akil, how are you? Thank you for the time.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about Drake.
So I appreciate the time and appreciate we're doing this on kind of short notice, so I appreciate you're doing that as well. So tell me a little bit quickly. Um, Drake Maye looked at top three, one of the top three quarterbacks in the class. Uh, do you look at him and do you look at him and think, in your mind, he might be the number one guy, or do you think the ranking of May by most people, where Caleb Williams is one and he's probably two, in your mind, is that accurate?
So I get why a lot of people have Caleb Williams at one and Drake at two. I'm not sure I completely agree. Like, I think there's a little bit of I don't know, I've seen some people call it Mahomesification of quarterback ranking, where people are looking at all of the really wild stuff Caleb Williams can do with his arm and stuff. And Drake May, I think, can do some of that, but he hasn't done it as much. So to me, that's where a lot of that ranking comes from. But as far as just being a quarterback, being the kind of quarterback that a modern NFL team needs, I think there's a very strong argument that Drake May is as good as there was in college football. Like, I don't think it would be a bad choice uh, for Chicago to pick him at one, or I don't think it's a consolation prize if someone gets him at two. I think he's every
And
bit the guy.
you think he's that no Mitch Trubisky worries for folks who draft Drake May?
I don't think so. I mean, I Mitch was drafted, I think, the first year I was doing Tar Heel blog, and at the time I thought he was a pretty decent quarterback prospect, but uh, um, I didn't see. I was probably higher on him than the thing that than what eventually happened with him, but I think Drake May's clearly like tiers above the type of quarterback that Mitch Trubisky was. Like, he's easily the best quarterback I've seen at UNC.
Okay. Um, Ceiling and floor for Drake May. For me, I wrote the other day, ceiling of a Justin Herbert type quarterback, guy that I think Herbert was the fifth or sixth overall pick, guy that maybe hasn't lived up to what people quite thought he could be, but he still could be, a top five type guy in the NFL. And Giants fans might hate me for this, but the floor that I put on Drake May was Daniel Jones. And just and it's early for me as I evaluate these guys, but what do you think of those, and what sort of ceiling or floor might you put on May?
I don't hate those. I've seen the Herbert comp a lot for Drake. They're pretty similarly built. They've got kind of a similar like way of throwing the ball. I think Herbert's probably got a little bit more of a rifle than Drake May does. I do think Drake's got a little bit more creativity to his game. I think Herbert, like the thing that keeps happening when I watch Herbert, and I think the reason why a lot of people want him to be better than he currently is that has so much talent and not enough. Like he just kind of seems restricted by his play calling a lot. And Drake elevates the stuff that is around him or the stuff that's given to him a lot more than I think. So I would probably put the ceiling maybe closer to um, like where Joe Burrow and Josh Allen are than maybe where Herbert is right now. Floor wise, I'd say Daniel Jones seems kind of accurate. If it's hard, he's kind of a slightly above average accurate quarterback rather than a kind of pinpoint passer. So if the accuracy doesn't completely translate and he's forced to be someone who like can make layups and can make some plays with his arm or make some plays with his legs, but can't really consistently drive an offense down the field, like that could happen. But that's probably the absolute floor. I think he's got too much talent to not be at least a replacement level starter.
You said that one of the things for you about Drake Maye that's interesting is that he elevates what's around him. Can you have examples of that, or can you tell us a little bit more about why you feel that way?
Yeah, so he's had two different offensive coordinators who kind of ran similar passing offenses, at least, and both of them are really kind of loose with their concepts. Phil Longo famously, he has profiles written about him. He has like a 27 plays in his playbook and kind of just asks his receivers to freelance off of that, his quarterbacks to find grass to throw to. And so, he left for Wisconsin after last year. They brought Chip Lindsey in, who said he was going to do much the same thing with the passing offense. And it was still a pretty simple kind of thing. Just like, I don't know if he did the same kinds of things as Longo did. Like, there were interviews where Phil Longo would talk about just saying, like, this play of receivers are just going to run whatever routes they can think of. I don't know if Lindsey was doing that, but he wasn't doing anything super complicated. And Drake, just by being so accurate to every level, uh, you know, took some questionable play calling, in my opinion, like an offense that should look really ugly, and still moved it down the field. It was still like a top 10 offense in the NCAA. He spread the ball around. Uh, he finds open guys. I don't know. He just I'm really worried. Let's put it this way. I'm very worried about, probably more so than a lot of other UNC fans are, about what the offense is going to look like next year, because I saw some warts in the play calling that Drake May was just good enough to cover up. I'm just not sure that there are a lot of guys who could have done that, like made this aesthetically unpleasing offense be as effective and as good as it was.
What do you think about a landing spot for Drake May? Let's talk a little bit about his transition, to the NFL. Is he a guy who you think can step in and be a week one starter in the NFL? Would that be good for him? You talked a little bit about the offense that was run the last couple of years at North Carolina. Is he a guy who would benefit from some time to sit and learn and just sort of take in an NFL offense and things like that? So, for the Giants, they're counting on Daniel Jones being their week one starter if he's back from the knee injury. I don't know, if they were to draft a guy like Drake May or someone else in the first round, Jones may start the year and not finish the year. Who knows?
Mhm.
But I'm just curious what you think of May's sort of readiness to walk in and be an NFL starter quickly.
So I don't know that it's a bad thing for anybody to wait a year. So in that sense, it might be good. I I think he's ready. It sound like the way that he kind of downloaded a new offense, even if it was similar, gives me a lot of hope. Right, that he came out the gates in 2023, like slinging it around just as effectively as he had before. That he kind of adjusted to different game plans. If you watch his game against Appalachian State, where everything is kind of like 10 yards and in because of how deep App's playing their safeties, versus a game like most of the ones he played in the ACC where he's bombing it down the field. Now that he had a deep threat later in the season that he didn't earlier in the form of Tez Walker. So I think he adjusted his game really well. He got new information about the playbook and new information about his offense really quickly. I don't think that, I think he's ready to start immediately, but like I said, he's talked before about how sitting behind Sam Howell for a year at the college level helped him learn how to kind of prepare his body for games and kind of just do tape review at the college level that he hadn't done before. So I'm sure that like having that landing spot or having that kind of parachute would help anybody, May included. But I don't think he's not ready to start and help a team immediately.
Obvious difference for you between Maye and Sam Howell?
There's a couple. The first is obviously the build. Like Sam Howell is 6'1", maybe, and plays like it. Like he can throw over the middle of the field, but he gets sacked a lot. Even with his kind of stocky frame, he has to move around a lot behind the pocket to find his throwing angles. And May looks a lot more like a prototypical passer, right? He's 6'5", he's seeing over the field, he's like downloading information immediately. And the other thing is that, at least by the end of their careers at UNC, Howell was looking to run pretty quickly after like seeing a read or two go by. And I think he's been a little bit more patient as an NFL passer, but now he's getting sacked all the time, right? He's the most sacked quarterback in the NFL. And May, I think, reads the field a lot more quickly. He's a much better processor than Howell was at the end of his career. And I think that's kind of his best trait, is his ability to see the field after the ball is snapped.
What's been interesting for me as I learn about Drake Maye and as I read about Maye and watch his film, one of the interesting things for me has been that a lot of the draft analysts who watch him, these guys tend to kind of latch on to a guy and then they start poking holes in a guy's game.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys will look at Drake Maye and say he was better in 2022 than he was in 2023. I'm curious if you agree with that. And I'm curious if you think that has, that gives any indication about what kind of NFL player he might be.
Maybe a little bit. Not enough where I think it matters. So a lot of what I see when I see people saying that is people looking at the interception numbers. And that's really colored by, I think he threw 4 picks in his first 3 games. And at least one of those was fully a garbage time kind of deal when UNC was up multiple scores in the last 5 minutes of the game. And past that, I think the numbers look pretty much identical. I think his rushing was a little bit better. His completion percentage inched up a little bit. And then on the film, I think his pocket footwork in 2023 was much better than it was in 2022, where he was kind of just he'd back up and sling it. He'd do all sorts of funky stuff. Usually to good results. He had a good year in 2022, but he looked a lot more disciplined as a passer for the most part in 2023. He got a dedicated QB coach, I think, in Clyde Christensen, so that helped a little bit. He had a couple of weird moments that looked kind of overcoached. There was one clip that I think a lot of UNC fans remember. I want to say somewhere in the middle of the season, where he just threw a forward pass after scrambling for 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. And it was just one of those things that looked awkward enough that it seemed like a sign of bad coaching. It wasn't something that we'd seen before from him. But mostly, I think, other than the interceptions, everything else about his, and like I said, most of those interceptions were early on in the season. He's still adjusting to a new offensive coordinator. He didn't have Tez Walker, who he expected to have for the season. So outside of that adjustment period, I think the kind of concerns about his play regressing are kind of overblown. I also wonder if they have something to do more with the team's performance and how the UNC collapsed down the stretch than about him individually. But as far as just watching him play outside, I keep saying it, outside of those picks, 2 against Minnesota and 2 against South Carolina, they're like I didn't see too much different at all. And mechanically, I think he was getting schooled in a positive manner.
Okay. And you said he had gone and gotten a an outside quarterbacks coach
Uh,
during the off season?
Not quite. The UNC staff brought in a volunteer quarterbacks coach to help him during the season.
Okay. So they brought in a guy specifically to work with May or with the quarterbacks in general?
Uh, I think his official role was some sort of like volunteer quarterbacks assistant, but Clyde Christensen was, I want to say, the QB coach at in New England for a while. He worked with Tom Brady, he worked with Peyton Manning, so all of the press around the hire was that he was going to be like helping Drake May with the kind of mechanics and fine points of being a high level quarterback.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting. So let me the Giants are at a point with Daniel Jones where he's at the end of he's after 5 years now. They had to decide after or they had to decide a while back whether or not to to pick up his 5th year option, what to do with his contract. They gave him 4 years, $160 million. I think this coming season is the last year of guaranteed money for Jones. And all of that aside, what I kind of want to ask you to do is put on your sort of, or look into your crystal ball, and if you were to look at Drake May 4 or 5 years into his NFL career, I mean, what and it's so hard to project these guys, but what do you think we're going to be looking at as a quarterback, at this point, about 5 years or so into his career? Is this a top 10 quarterback? Is he an average NFL starter? Is he a guy that can be a big time NFL QB?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I will couch this and say that I cannot help but be optimistic about North Carolina players in the draft. Like, I am frequently burned, but I'll keep hoping and seeing the best in all of the guys that have played for the Tar Heels and are going into the NFL. So to me, I understand that picking quarterbacks is so very like it's never what people expect it to be. It's so rare that the guys that people think are can't miss, turn out to be everything that people want them to be. But like Drake May, to me, looks like everything I want in my NFL team's quarterback. I think it's really likely that he's like a top 10 guy in 5 years. He just looks the part too much. He plays the position the way that I want to see it be played in 2024. He's mobile. He knows when to break a pocket and when not to. He's got improvisational skills. He can throw from different angles, but he doesn't have to. He can do stuff the normal way. He can do stuff the kind of insane way. And so, a lot of things can happen, but to me, he looks like the kind of quarterback the league is looking for.
The Giants sit at 6. He's almost certain not to be there at number 6, according to
Mhm.
everything that we see. Are the Giants crazy if they give up whatever they have to give up to get to 2 or 3, if that's where it is, to get Drake May to make that move? Is that it's going to cost a lot for the Giants to do that. It's probably going to cost at least, one first round pick. It's going to cost one of their second round picks, probably cost more than that. But are they crazy to take that big swing?
I So I am a Carolina Panthers fan, and we're still kind of wrestling in the fandom with the question of like, were the Panthers like how bad was the process of trading up from 8 to 1 to get Bryce Young, right? And I can see the idea that says, you know, get the quarterbacks who fall to you. Like keep rolling the dice until you don't have to mortgage a franchise to like get a guy. But I'm not completely on board with that. To me, quarterback is probably the most important position in professional sports, right? And once you have that, you can let other things fall into place, especially on a rookie contract, especially on a first round contract, which lasts a year longer than every other rookie contract. Um, so to me, if you've identified that you like have the assets to go up and that you like trust your evaluation, then there's almost not a price too high. Like you might get clowned for it later if it doesn't work out. Like the Panthers might be in a year like we're currently talking about with the 49ers and um, Trey Lance. But that chance to me is almost always worth taking. So if you see a
Mhm.
quarterback that you think is better than the rest that's going to elevate your franchise, I'm not, and the price from 6 to 2 is not going to be as much as 1 to 8 or the Niners trade up to 3. So to me, it's worth it. Like I think ultimately, I think Drake is going to make whoever drafts him think it was worth it. And if the Giants front office and scouting people agree with that, then like I think take the swing.
Cool. Hey, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about a couple of other North Carolina guys who are on the Giants roster currently before I let you go. 2022 draft, Joe Shane took a swing with two North Carolina offensive linemen. He drafted Josh Azudu in the third round, and he drafted Marcus McKethan in the fifth round. And there were people who said, what is he doing? He's crazy. How can he draft two offensive linemen from North Carolina, which had a terrible offensive line? And I think part of what we're learning is a lot of the reason that the North Carolina offensive line looked bad or as bad as it did was because Sam Howell tends to take a lot of sacks and he tends to make his offensive linemen look a little bit worse than they actually are. But that aside, neither one of those two players has really established himself with the Giants. Just your thoughts on Azudu, who was a third round pick, and McKethan, who's a fifth round pick, and whether you still think that those two guys can be part of the solution for the Giants on the offensive line.
Uh, so I think I wrote about Azudu at the time that he was like the the bright spot on a really terrible offensive line. And you're definitely right to say that Sam Howell probably made his line worse than it was, but it still wasn't very good. Um, you could kind of see or, like if you watched, even if you assigned like a third to a half of the sacks that Howell took, like strictly on the quarterback, that still left a lot of meat for the offensive line to be wrong. And Azudu was the guy who kind of made things look even passable at times. They'd put him whatever position they needed to try and get the other four guys in the right spot. So if a right tackle was injured, he'd play right tackle. If the left tackle Austin Richards, who's now with the Cowboys, was either injured or underperforming, then he'd play left tackle and some backup would play guard. So, he was given a lot of responsibility and handled it all, I thought, really well. And even if he was on a bad line and kind of under the radar, I liked the pick at the time, and I still think I haven't followed him too closely, but I understand he's kind of been injured a little bit his first 2 years with the Giants. I think that he's got an NFL future. McKeithen, I feel like was drafted mostly just because he's big. I didn't see that much of the same kind of talent that I saw with Izudu. I thought the fifth round was like a very surprising place for him to go. I thought he'd be like more of a late day three or undrafted free agent kind of guy. And I don't know, like you can't coach that kind of size. Maybe there's something to it, but I feel a lot more confident about Izudu sticking in the NFL than I do about McKeithen.
Yeah, I guess I thought Azudu, it concerns me a little bit that he's been in a competition for left guard for 2 years and hasn't been able to win it. and I sort of throw out the time he spent at left tackle in 2023, which wasn't good because he's not an NFL left tackle. He probably shouldn't have been out there. I think he's an NFL guard,
Mhm.
but I don't know. He's been injured, but it does concern me. I think that he hasn't been able to win that job outright in two chances. But you still think that maybe allowed to settle into one spot that he can be an NFL starter?
So I haven't followed him too closely. I know I had heard that he had taken snaps at left tackle and that it didn't go phenomenally for him. And I remember, I think, reading that had been kind of the plan last offseason to kind of just give him some reps at every position as kind of a swingman. I don't like maybe that's his kind of best role is just like as a sixth offensive lineman who could play any of the positions if someone goes down. Maybe he's not a starter. There's like being an NFL offensive line starter is really, really hard. But I think he's got talent.
All right. Akil, I appreciate the time. And Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.